It's a pleasure being here on the Bicentenary year of the Hindu college turned Presidency college turned Presidency University. It's also a pleasure to talk about this area of science and humanities, the global summit that Professor Anuradha Lohia wanted some of us to talk about. And in particular, science and humanities, whether the Twain shall ever meet. That was the question posed to me. But I believe already, looking at the history and the scholarship that the Presidency University has over these years nurtured, the Twain seems to be coming together slowly but surely. The debate on whether the science humanities Twain will meet is a long history. But it appears, as I said, the gap is narrowing. But it has taken some time and curious turns over the last couple of hundred years. Modern science, and in particular quantum physics, has some resonance to some of the Oriental philosophy, mythology, and religion. And that has been the romantic notion of some people. The romantic notion has led to books like The Tao of Physics or David Bohm's writings and so on. Classical physics, on the other hand, in particular the laws of motion and energy and the laws of thermodynamics, on the other hand, are in sharp contrast to some belief systems. The first law of thermodynamics says you cannot get something out of nothing. What a true thing to say. You can't get anything out of nothing. And the second law is even worse. It says entropy in the universe will keep on growing, increasing, and so on. These are some examples that tend to unmeet the science and some aspects of humanities. On the other end of the Twain, again starting in the last century, we began describing areas of humanities such as economics, psychology, sociology, and so on, as soft sciences. No insult meant, but they're called soft sciences. And they're soft because they started using some of the ideas and some of the methods. For example, surveys, plotting on graphs, solving mathematical equations, and so on. I'm reminded of a friend of mine, Professor Subodh Chennai. I was at that time doing something at the Third World Academy of Sciences in Trieste, Italy. That building is over there. Adjacent building was the Institute of Theoretical Physics, where Subodh was. And we met for lunch, a group like this. And suddenly Subodh Chennai mentioned, do you know, out of all the countries of the world, India is the lone country where both the president and the prime minister can solve partial differential equations. The president, of course, was Kalam, and the prime minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. We had a remarkable situation here. Also, analysis of the kind that we've been familiar with in contemporary physics, or hard science as you call it, such as, for example, the prisoner's dilemma. All of you know about the prisoner's dilemma. This was actually all written in a slightly different manner, of all things, in a book called the Arthashastra, which is the book of economics, welfare, and so on. And there is a remarkable analysis of this, and I'll give you for people who might be interested on the website, where one R. Pillai, was actually a management guru in Bombay, has talked about this in some detail. It was not called the prisoner's dilemma at that time, it was called the Mandala theory. Chanakya was a soft scientist, I think. These advances began to bring some areas of humanities and hard sciences slowly together. There's also been some argument that scientists and humanities scholars always make assumptions in different ways, but basically do the same thing. I think this is a thought worth pushing further into. While it is true that science is rational, logical, and suffers no high priests whose dictum rules the roost, aspects of ethics and interpersonal courtesy and respect impinge directly on their attitudes and practices. Even we hard scientists follow certain rules and traditional practices of the guild, as it were, such as responding and acting on referee comments, anonymous referee comments. How I wish I were a referee and not an author. Offering credit to precedents, to co-workers, and so on, or some of these. These are essentially practices that we use. But as they demolish long-held beliefs, some practitioners of science have taken the high road of arrogance. It do not go well with the lay public or even scholars of humanities. No one likes derision. Compare the title, The God Delusion, the selfish gene. I would rather go by what the other scientist, Edward Deming, said, in God we trust, but all you must have data. Ethics has long been thought of as a branch of sociology and doesn't have any quantifiable parameters. However, aspects of ethics become particularly compelling in chemistry, biology, medical and environmental sciences. A documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, based on the former Vice President Al Gore's campaign about global warming, was an ethical critique of the climate deniers and fossil fuel industry lobby. Even earlier than that, close to 200 years ago, when the Native American Indian chief Seattle declared beautiful declaration that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. He spoke an eternal truth. Think about why the president of Maldives, the bunch of small islands west of us, he once said in despair, and on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States, that he wanted to buy land from Australia to resettle his people. This is a moment of despair. It's not going to go away, no matter how much climate denial might have. I was struck by what Mr. Vivek Kumar said in the earlier, one of the slides pointed out that technology is ethics neutral. Is it ethics neutral? I think we need to think about that. Technology produces for us a variety of things. Clearly, it's the way that you use technology. Right? There is an ethical question that comes about, an ethical dimension comes and so on. So I think we need to think about this a little bit more. I don't want to be a Luddite saying don't use technology. I don't want to be also a gaga about technology and so on. But where does one get this balance? I think this is rather important. To try a promising molecule as a drug is an ethical act. Trying it first on animals is already beset with ethical issues. Animal lovers are up in arms. And when we try drug candidates on higher animals, such as monkeys or even cattle, agencies such as PETA, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, demand, and correctly so, that well-defined protocols be followed in drug trials, including proper treatment of animals, reducing their number, caring for their pain, and assuring their safety. Hence the elaborate rules laid out by institutional and national guideline regulators. But what has puzzled me somewhat is this categorization of higher animals versus lower animals, such as mice, rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, and so on. Somehow, some animals seem more equal than other animals. An interesting point, this is sooner or later going to happen to us in India. An interesting point has arisen with respect to working with apes and chimpanzees, bonobos, and so on. Genetic analysis, as you know, shows that they are our closest relatives, ancestors perhaps. We share over 98% of our genes with these primates. A court in New York had issued a writ of habeas corpus on behalf of two chimpanzees, Hercules and Leo, names of the two chimpanzees, who were being used in animal experimentation. The argument went on, and the judge decided, but I accept that they have a certain amount of personhood. Personhood. This is no light or laughing matter. I wonder what you would think if you were the judge and somebody comes out with an argument with this kind. As we move along, we have new issues to tackle and decide. Such issues lead to what the Australian scientist Birdsmore had called the shifting sands of science ethics. Many of us recall how the Nazi doctors in Germany tried clinical experimentation on Jewish people, or even Americans used the Negroes in Tuskegee, Alabama, between 1932 to 1970 for testing drugs against syphilis. It was in reaction to such inhuman practices that the World Congress of Medical Doctors, medical practitioners, got together in Helsinki, in Finland, and formulated what is now called the Helsinki Declaration, or ethical guidelines for working with fellow humans as subjects in clinical trials. Elaborate guidelines have been formulated, and every institution must perforce adhere to these, both for working with animals and for human beings. Even here, there appears a caste system. Clinicians offering treatment to humans are sometimes, and by some in their own guild, thought to be superior to veterinarians who work with animals, who treat animals and so on. A new term has even come about, which I did not know about until I started preparing for this talk. It's called zoobiquity. as opposed to in extension of equity. Zubiquity would essentially mean I have to think in terms of equality or bring them together, animals and humans and so on. But the meaning is self-explanatory. Some commentators have used the word medical humanities. This involves the interdisciplinary fields such as literature, religion, music, art, philosophy, and others in the clinical environment. Patients are not simply centers of bodily symptoms or receivers of drugs. One needs to factor into the patient's background, his experience, and his way of life, and so on, to the greatest degree possible. In fact, our old-fashioned doctors with the little briefcase will come to your house. They were practitioners of this. They would talk to you about a lot of things. And somehow you felt that he is giving me very good medicine. This may also be part of what people refer to as a placebo effect. I've been given a drug, sham drug, but I still feel very good. So some of these, I think, have to do with individual personality and so on. But even more important than all this is new biology. New biology involving our understanding of the genetic material, DNA, and the techniques of isolating pieces of DNA and tailoring it elsewhere, or cloning them, came about. Molecular biologists met on their own 30 years ago in a little place called Asilomar in California and imposed on themselves moratoriums. I think one of the highest ethical practices that was introduced at that time. So they will not do certain kinds of experiments until things become clearer over time. This was not a government doing. This was really by the guild themselves. Such self-imposed restrictions are now universal and followed to this day by a variety of institutional and national regulatory processes. The method for generating Dolly, the sheep, we all heard about that. You take the genome from the udder of sheep 1, you take the egg from sheep 2, remove all the genome from the sheep 2s, put this in there, take this entire thing to sheep 3 as a surrogate mother, and out comes Dolly the baby. It works. If it works in animals, it should work in humans. It's a remarkable story about this that came about. When Dolly was brought out to life, one correspondent, somewhat like Arnab Goswami, I think, went over to the Vatican and he wanted to find out from one of the cardinals there. He said, Father, you know, not too far away from Rome, is this place called Turin, where we hear there is a shroud or the cloth that covered Lord Jesus immediately after his crucifixion. It is still there. Chances are there may still be some DNA or some cells of Jesus 1700, 1800 years, 2000 years later. And if we can therefore out of this also resurrect Jesus, what would you think? You know, the best answer I have ever heard in my life was by that cardinal. He said, son, yes, you would have produced a body of Jesus. not his soul. I think that was and the reason you can now think about this, and what a beautiful answer that is. That is really what we are all here for. What use would it be? Was that really the point? Because in effect, when I generated the body, the hardware, all the machinery that goes, so we have it all ready, you've got to boot the system. When you wish to boot the system, you need Presidency University, you need colleges, you need culture, you need sociology, you need humanities. Suddenly you notice. So there is this connection that you need to constantly think in terms of. That I think is very important. Perhaps the most revealing and important discovery in science, which has bound us all together, is the reading of the entire human genome, human genetic code. Professor Partha Majumdar is here, done some outstanding work on where did we all come from. Literally came from two areas. Some fellows came from the west, some other fellows came from the east. And when you look at the genetic profile, you read my genome, and you read the genome of my son-in-law who is in Nigeria, who pretty much the same. Remarkable. That leads to the realization that we humans, number one, are descendants of apes. Number two, we all came from one ancestral parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, and so on. And 99.99% of all our genetic material is the same. This brings the 7.5 billion people across the world together as members of one big family. I don't think there has been any other involved message that science has offered to bring together ethics, humanities, social sciences, and all that. We're all one. Castes, communities are all social constructs. They are not biological constructs. That I think is important. And once we understand this, I think unity comes. And I think that's the largest message that the human gene program has come together with. That all of us, humans are one family, has always been thought of, but in more way poetical, spiritual, and maybe even fondly hoped by a lot of people. We just use those words with a certain amount of hope or a certain amount of coming together and so on. But now you notice science actually has brought that together. That I think is very important. I come from Tamil Nadu, where 1600 years ago was already a literary society. We had three what they call sangams. One of the earliest sangams was a man called Pungunar. He wrote two major poetic essays. One was called Purananuru, 400 poems about the world, and Ahananuru, about myself. And one of the things he has said, which I think is really beautiful. Those of you, how many of you know Tamil here? Interesting. I'll just read it. Yagum ure yavalum kerir. Tidum nandrum pirandarvara. To us, all towns are one. All men are king. Life's good comes not from others' gift, not ill. Man's pain and pain's relief are from within. So on. This was a fond hope. This was one that brought people together. But now you realize we actually see this in terms of what we understand from genetic biology. Increasingly, politicians want more and more of technologies and would rather not support those who study French literature, something of that kind. What a terrible thing to do. This sickness has spread and taken on a pandemic scale in our country, in India. As a result, we find students, even in prestigious institutions such as the IITs, ISERs, central universities, IIMs, and so on, national law universities, ignorant of classics, languages and literatures, art and classical music, poetry, and often even their own mother tongues. This state is a mild exception, only a mild exception. And that, I think, we are losing out quite a bit. A person with scientific or technical competence, even excellent, and wealth, is incomplete if he or she doesn't have the sensitivity towards the human condition and what may be called the finer things in life. Paul Berg understood this when he called the Asilomar meat. That's important. A practicing physician becomes a better one if only he had read George Bernard Shaw's The Doctor's Dilemma. The Doctor's Dilemma was interesting. This lady has TB, and that very rich man has TB. I have just one pill to give. What do I give? He gives it to the rich man, ignoring the poor girl. The poor girl dies. The rich man is cured. Once the rich man dies, the doctor is very fond of the rich man's wife. He courts her. He says, I would like to, get along with you. And she says, I'm married. Double dilemma of the doctor. Likewise, a scholar in humanities gains by reading remarkable books. The Lives of a Cell by Lewis Thomas, or The Ascent of Man by the mathematician Jacob Bronowski. There are people hailing from this state. Why do we admire Siddhartha Mukherjee? How many of you have seen his new book called The Gene? Atul Gawande. There are people written remarkably, George Gamow, Jacob Bronowski, people like this. Each one of them has excelled in his own career, on one hand, and in broadening the horizons of the readers through their evocation. Their evocation was really because of their background, their knowledge, their interest, and their competence in areas of humanities. Let me end this with one last example. One of the science magazines, I think it's the New Scientist, challenged its readers. The readers are all essentially scientists and quasi-scientists. During one of the Christmas, every year they have a competition. In one such one, they said, we would like you scientists to compose poems in science. And the challenge was, you compose a poem about something scientific, but it must be in haiku. You know what a haiku is? Haiku is a Japanese poem, 3 lines, The first line is 5 syllables, second line is 7 syllables, and the third is again 5. So 5, 7, 5. That was in English because it was a new scientist. And the one who got the prize did a remarkable haiku. See, haiku also has a certain amount of, what shall I say, philosophical, awareness. It kindles you to think about things. And it also has such a deep meaning in itself that you can read more and more meanings out of it and interpret it essentially based on your own intellectual, spiritual, whatever, background. And this fellow wrote, and I think it's a fantastic poem. He wrote, Galileo said, that the earth moves round the sun. Galileo said that the earth moves round the sun, while the church stood still. I have not seen a better fusion of science and humanities here. We are celebrating the 200th year of Presidency University. The Bengalis always think that they are somehow more culturally aware and all that than the rest of the country. So here is a challenge. I want any one of you here to give a similar haiku, any language, I don't care. All right? But I know you do it in English and Bengali. Haiku, 575. And we will have a small team. And the first prize winner will get a few thousand rupees, new currency. And we will think along those, okay? So there will be 3 prizes. I think you have my email ID and so on, okay? So this challenge I pose to all of you in Presidency University because I know this is a you teach everything here in terms of scholarship and teaching and so on. Could be science, could be humanities, whatever. So I want a haiku of the same order, of the same quality as the Galileo said that the earth moves around the sun while the church stood still. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful talk, great insights, and we have lots of time for questions. Please.
Thank you, sir, for that talk. I really love the haiku. So, sir, I have 3 questions. So the first question is that you mentioned that the molecular biologists imposed some rules over themselves and they decided to not practice some techniques or some things till things became more clearer. So, sir, the first question would be that how do the things become more clearer if you don't end up practicing them sometimes? So the second question would be, you said that some people fought for 2 chimpanzees, saying that they have some amount of personhood. So, sir, I don't understand what exactly this personhood means and what is the parameter by which you judge the amount of personhood that something has in it. And, sir, my third question, when we were talking about the Nazi people working with clinical experiments on Jewish people and the Americans working on Negro population. So, sir, so could you please shed some more light on why race has been such an important determining factor on who the hegemony attacks? Thank you so much, sir.
About personhood of a chimpanzee. Even closer. My wife is a media advisor, as you can see. See, what is a person? You need to think about that. Now, there are several you can think of a variety of properties. Cognition. Cognition means, to collect information, understand the information, whichever way you want and so on. Self-cognition is a rather important thing. If you take a chimpanzee and put a mirror on, it appears that the chimpanzee knows this is me, different from my brother or the other chimpanzees and so on. So there is a self-cognition is one. The second aspect, still debatable, but the second aspect has to do with creativity. Now, creativity would really mean doing things that are not necessarily genetically put in. So it's really something that you have learned as it were from the environment and so on. A chimpanzee cannot sing, he doesn't sing, but he drums. Now, this is interesting. Jane Goodall, who did quite a bit of work, an English lady scientist, she has studied chimpanzees and gorillas and so on for a long time. So some of these aspects of cognition, creativity and so on are defined as personhood, okay, as opposed to a robot. Some people ask questions about, is a robot a person? Can, for example, well-endowed computer make music? These are questions about cognition, creativity and so on. It turns out that among the animals, such self-cognition and creative personhood, as it were, seem to be with at least two animals. One is the dolphin, and the other is the higher primate like chimpanzee and so on. That's the idea behind personhood. The third question you asked about Nazis and the American whites who actually did the experiment on. Somehow, there seems to be one, these are humans not exactly equal to us. They're inferior. In India, you call it the caste system, the untouchables. Okay. Not only do you do this, you also treat them as animals and do experiments on them. The moment you find out that they are the same, then there is a huge ethical and even moral question that comes in here. That's point number 3, okay? And that's why the Declaration of Helsinki and so on happened. What was the first question?
Sir, my first question was that, sir, when molecular biologists are taking over the field that we will not practice some things till things become clearer, how do we understand that things have become clearer if we haven't practiced it yet?
Yeah. See, with the understanding that I can actually isolate my genetic material and I can play with it. That I can, for example, read it, and when I see in somebody there is an error in the message and so on, that I can actually cut and repair that. Now, there will be a huge cultural objection or at least cultural angle that comes onto this. And that is, are you playing God? Only God created humans. That kind of a belief system. Or, am I my brother's keeper? Questions of this kind will come. Or, can I make better of myself? So I can essentially self-clone myself and so on. Or these issues, they border on ethical, certainly moral questions as well. And so much better that we understand first what is it that's happening than moving further. This was the basis behind the self-regulations that was put together in the 1970s by the Barcelona Conference.
Sir, just a bit of clarification, sir. When we are looking at personhood with abilities like cognition and self-cognition, sir, don't you think that our idea of personhood is somehow becoming very limited to the anthropocentric point of view, where we are just looking at human perspectives and the human abilities that should be found in animals, and hence the animal has personhood? Can we not extend this ethical understanding to other abilities which are probably not found in animals, but probably not found in humans, but found in animals, and hence the animal has personhood?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we can have during coffee time. But you know, a great expert in the area of neurophysiology stands sitting right before me. Bug him, ask these questions of him.
There's a question from there.
Yeah.
And may I make an announcement? Please, if you have more than one question, pick one that you think is the most interesting and ask
Well,
that.
this is not a question, just this. Thank you, Dr. Balasubramanian, for your fantastic talk. This is just a reaction to the beautiful haiku that you shared with us. And it talks about the implicit superiority of the Bengali character. So I was wondering about how about this as a kind of a talking back to that assumption. Dr. Bala said, Bengalis are conceited. I forgot last line, but I remember it. Dirosioma. Dr. Bala said, 5. Bengalis are conceited. 7. Dirosioma. 5.
We have time for one or two more questions, please.
Dr. Bala apologizes to you.
I would also welcome questions from the female members of the audience as well, because they seem to be very, very, very loud at this time. So I would like them to come forward with questions as well. One question.
So, first of all, thank you very much for this lecture. Now, my name is Biplab Karuk. I'm from the Department of Philosophy, Presidency University. Now, my question is, I mean, if you are, taking some human traits to be the parameter for treating other beings, I mean, other creatures than of humans as the ethical beings, right? If you take, I mean, as the means of taking them into consideration for the ethical treatment, right? Now, the human traits are not sufficient to be considered as the parameter, right? Now, if we take each and every creature to be treated ethically, right? And then what is the future of scientific researches, where we need to vivisect animals for scientific researches?
Right.
Yeah, that's it, sir.
In a way, I think what you say would be true on a far more individual basis. Okay. Ethics will also have to not only, ultimately, ethics really means behavior norms of individuals, but you also think of a collection of individuals. Therefore, you think of a generally acceptable code of conduct for a large number of people in a given community. That I think is important. Philosophically, one would agree with you, because that's why you talk about, I will purify myself, or I have seen a variety of things. I have, my belief system is such that I will not harm even, which even belief systems are made of that. But ethics is one that will, it does not involve any moral or religious base at all. It's only based on, by and large, what is appropriate, what societal